Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when the sun itself seemed to abandon the world. Imagine, if you will, the chilling, bone-deep silence of a Nordic winter, but amplified, stretched out into an eternity of twilight. You're not just enduring a few short gray days. You're living through months where the sun barely kisses the horizon, or perhaps doesn't appear at all. You feel the constant, heavy weight of the biting cold seeping into your very bones, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Every breath you take condenses into a frosty cloud, a stark reminder of the unforgiving chill that permeates your small, enclosed world. The very ground beneath your worn leather boots is iron hard, frozen solid, and the distant howl of the wind sounds less like a breeze and more like the mournful cry of a hungry wolf. This isn't your cozy, electric-heated Netflix binge winter. This is a raw, elemental struggle, where the line between survival and oblivion is thinner than a strand of raw wool. You probably won't survive this, but hey, it's a good story, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wild to see how far these tales travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a Viking farmer, not a warrior king. Your wealth isn't in conquered lands or piles of gold, but in the sturdy walls of your longhouse. The healthy glow of your children's faces and the plumpness of your livestock. But as the days shorten, the shadows lengthen, and a peculiar dread begins to settle over the community. It's not just the usual winter anxiety. It's something far more profound. It's the sun, your life giver, your timekeeper, your eternal companion in the heavens, has begun its slow, terrifying retreat. Each day it climbs less high, stays for a shorter duration, till one morning you wake and there's just nothing. A perpetual twilight. A soft gray gloom that hangs over the landscape like a suffocating blanket. This isn't an eclipse. Is the sun simply deciding, nah, I'm good, thanks? Imagine the psychological impact. Your ancestors told tales of Fimbulwinter, the great winter before Ragnarok, and suddenly, those tales feel less like myth and more like prophecy. You watch your breath fogging in the frigid air, the skeletal branches of the trees scratching against the perpetually dim sky, and a knot forms in your stomach. This particular winter, historians still argue whether it was a volcanic eruption in the distant past, like the one in 536 AD that caused widespread famine, or perhaps a prolonged period of intense solar minimum, or even a localized severe weather event that simply got stretched into legend. Whatever its cause, for you, it's a very real, very present threat. Your small community, nestled by the fjord, feels incredibly vulnerable. A tiny flicker of life against an overwhelming canvas of cold, dark nothingness. The usual rhythms of farm life, dictated by the sun's passage, are thrown into disarray. You find yourself relying more on the position of stars when they can be seen through the persistent cloud cover, or simply on the internal clock of your own aching body. Every task, from feeding the animals to fetching water, becomes an arduous expedition into the gloom. The snow, when it falls, doesn't sparkle. It just adds another layer of oppressive whiteness to the already dim world, reflecting the minimal light in a way that makes shadows seem even deeper. The wind whips it into drifts that bury your simple fences and make paths impassable. You learn to move by touch as much as by sight, navigating the familiar landscape around your farm by memory. The feel of the frozen ground beneath your feet, the whisper of the wind against your ear. It's a sensory deprivation chamber, but one you can't escape. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when the sun itself seemed to abandon the world. Imagine, if you will, the chilling, bone-deep silence of a Nordic winter, but amplified, stretched out into an eternity of twilight. You're not just enduring a few short gray days. You're living through months where the sun barely kisses the horizon, or perhaps doesn't appear at all. You feel the constant heavy weight of the biting cold seeping into your very bones. The air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Every breath you take condenses into a frosty cloud, a stark reminder of the unforgiving chill that permeates your small, enclosed world. The very ground beneath your worn leather boots is iron hard, frozen solid. And the distant howl of the wind sounds less like a breeze and more like the mournful cry of a hungry wolf. This isn't your cozy, electric-heated Netflix binge winter. This is a raw, elemental struggle, where the line between survival and oblivion is thinner than a strand of raw wool. You probably won't survive this, but hey, it's a good story, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wild to see how far these tales travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a Viking farmer, not a warrior king. Your wealth isn't in conquered lands or piles of gold, but in the sturdy walls of your longhouse. The healthy glow of your children's faces and the plumpness of your livestock. But as the days shorten, the shadows lengthen, and a peculiar dread begins to settle over the community. It's not just the usual winter anxiety. It's something far more profound. It's the sun, your life giver, your timekeeper. Your eternal companion in the heavens has begun its slow, terrifying retreat. Each day it climbs less high, stays for a shorter duration, till one morning you wake and there's just nothing. A perpetual twilight. A soft gray gloom that hangs over the landscape like a suffocating blanket. This isn't an eclipse. Is the sun simply deciding, nah, I'm good, thanks? Imagine the psychological impact. Your ancestors told tales of Fimbulwinter, the great winter before Ragnarok, and suddenly, those tales feel less like myth and more like prophecy. You watch your breath fogging in the frigid air, the skeletal branches of the trees scratching against the perpetually dim sky, and a knot forms in your stomach. This particular winter, historians still argue whether it was a volcanic eruption in the distant past, like the one in 536 AD that caused widespread famine, or perhaps a prolonged period of intense solar minimum, or even a localized severe weather event that simply got stretched into legend. Whatever its cause, for you, it's a very real, very present threat. Your small community, nestled by the fjord, feels incredibly vulnerable. A tiny flicker of life against an overwhelming canvas of cold, dark nothingness. The usual rhythms of farm life, dictated by the sun's passage, are thrown into disarray. You find yourself relying more on the position of stars when they can be seen through the persistent cloud cover, or simply on the internal clock of your own aching body. Every task, from feeding the animals to fetching water, becomes an arduous expedition into the gloom. The snow, when it falls, doesn't sparkle. It just adds another layer of oppressive whiteness to the already dim world, reflecting the minimal light in a way that makes shadows seem even deeper. The wind whips it into drifts that bury your simple fences and make paths impassable. Learn to move by touch as much as by sight, navigating the familiar landscape around your farm by memory. The feel of the frozen ground beneath your feet, the whisper of the wind against your ear. It's a sensory deprivation chamber, but one you can't escape. The longhouse is more than just a dwelling. It's the beating heart of your existence in this sunless winter. It's a low, turf-roofed structure, its walls a mix of stone and timber, packed with insulating earth. Smoke from the central hearth curls lazily upwards, seeking the smoke hole in the roof, though much of it lingers, creating a perpetual haze that stings your eyes but also offers a strange comfort. It smells of wood smoke, damp earth, simmering stew. An unwashed body's a heady organic cocktail that is both home and survival chamber. You share this space with your extended family, perhaps 20 or 30 souls, from the eldest wizened grandmother to the smallest, squalling babe. Privacy is a concept for later centuries. For people who didn't need to huddle together for warmth against an existential chill, You eat, sleep, work, and even relieve yourselves discreetly. 1. Hopes into a well-placed bucket, all within these smoky confines. The warmth from the central fire is precious, carefully nurtured. Every ember is a tiny guardian against the encroaching cold. Fuel is a constant concern. You had spent the autumn, before the sun vanished, gathering every scrap of fallen timber, cutting peat from the bogs, and even hacking its stubborn, gnarled roots. Now, each log is rationed, each bundle of kindling used sparingly. The fire isn't just for warmth, of course. It's for cooking, for light, and for a potent psychological anchor. Staring into the dancing flames, you can almost forget the oppressive darkness outside, silence broken only by the creak of the timbers in the wind or the occasional lowing of cattle from the byre attached at one end. Around the hearth, life adapts to the gloom. Find yourself moving with an innate caution, your hands extended, anticipating obstacles in the dim light. Your other senses sharpen. You recognize individuals by the sound of their footsteps, the cadence of their breathing, the distinct scent of their clothes. Conversations are hushed, punctuated by the crackle of the fire or the soft whir of a spinning wheel. During the few hours of day, which is really just a slightly less dark twilight, a bit more light might filter in through the smoke hole or a tiny, horn-covered window, revealing the familiar contours of the longhouse. You see the wooden sleeping platforms lining the walls, covered with furs and wool blankets, offering scant protection from the drafts. Above, rafters are hung with drying fish, cured meats, and bundles of herbs, a larder constantly shrinking. The floor, packed earth, is cold beneath your feet, even through thick socks. Children, often indistinguishable in their layers of drab wool, play quiet games, their laughter muted, their movements constrained by the lack of space and the omnipresent. Cold. One quirky tidbit from historical accounts is how important dogs were, not just for hunting or guarding, but as literal bed warmers or hot water bottles due to their body heat, often sleeping among the family. Some historians still argue whether the Viking longhouse was always as communal as depicted, or if there were more subtle divisions of space within 4 different family units. Regardless, in this sunless winter, every inch of that shared warmth is a blessing. You learn to interpret the longhouse's subtle groans and shifts. The whisper of snow against the roof, the changing direction of the wind through the smoke hole. It's a living entity, your protector, and its well-being is intrinsically linked to your own. You sweep the hearth daily, a ritual of cleansing and renewal, pushing the cold ash aside to reveal the precious, glowing embers that represent another day survived. This isn't just domesticity. It's an act of faith against the unending night as the sunless winter drags on. An even more insidious threat begins to loom larger than the cold itself. Hunger. You can feel it, a gnawing emptiness in your stomach that no amount of hot broth seems to fully quell. Your carefully stocked food stores, once a source of comfort and security, are dwindling with alarming speed. The autumn harvest, while plentiful by ordinary standards, was never meant to sustain a community through months of perpetual twilight. You had barrels of salted fish, hung strings of dried meat, root vegetables buried in earth cellars, and a precious few sacks of grain. Now, you find yourself staring at half-empty shelves, each visible gap a stark reminder of impending scarcity. Every meal becomes a calculated exercise in rationing. The daily gruel, once a hearty blend of grain and whatever dried fish or meat could be spared, now grows thinner, more watery. You start adding foraged lichens, tree bark, anything that might provide a modicum of sustenance, even if it tastes like dirt in desperation. You watch the children, their usually bright eyes, a little dimmer, their movements a little slower, and your heart aches with a fear more profound than any fear of battle. This is a quiet, creeping terror, your ancestors' new famine. Recurring nightmare throughout history, exacerbated by poor harvests, war, or, as in your case, inexplicable climate events. The Vikings, for all their prowess as warriors and traders, were ultimately farmers and fishermen, utterly dependent on the bounty of the land and sea. When that bounty failed, even for a season, Survival became a brutal lottery. You remember the elderly Thora, her voice raspy, recounting tales of a great hunger from her youth? When entire families perished in the snow, their bodies found frozen in their homes, you realize you are living that tale now. You start noticing the subtle signs in your neighbors, the gauntness of faces, the way eyes linger on food, the almost imperceptible tremor in hands. The jokes become fewer, replaced by a grim determination. Even the children, usually so boisterous, are quieter, their play less energetic. One quirky tidbit about Viking food preservation is their use of skyr, a type of fermented dairy product similar to yogurt, which could last for months and provided vital protein and probiotics. They also used fermentation for fish, creating hakarl, a pungent shark, meat that, while an acquired taste, was highly durable. Historians still argue about the exact composition of the average Viking diet during winter, and how much reliance was placed on stored provisions versus what little hunting or fishing might be possible in extreme conditions. For you, the answer, it's simple. You eat what you have, and you pray for more. You learn to savor every bite, to chew slowly, to trick your stomach into believing it's fuller than it is. Your dreams become vivid, filled with images of feasts you once enjoyed. Roasted boar, fresh bread, sweet berries. You wake with a dry mouth and a renewed sense of emptiness, and the long, sunless day stretches before you. Each hour another step, closer to the bottom of the food barrel. It's a cruel irony that, even with the cold, your body is consuming itself, burning through precious reserves as you try to stay warm. Every unnecessary movement feels like a waste of energy, every moment of rest, a desperate attempt to conserve what little strength you have left. The sounds of chewing, even in the longhouse, are few and far between as meals become solemn. Quiet affairs beyond the human inhabitants. Another crucial component of your Viking farm's survival during the sunless winter is the livestock. These aren't just animals. They're your walking, breathing capital, your future food, your source of clothing, and frankly, your body heat generators. Your cows, sheep, goats, and a few hardy pigs are sheltered in the byre, a section of the longhouse often connected directly to the human living space. This design, a stroke of ingenious pragmatism, allows the animal's body warmth to contribute to the overall heating of the longhouse, a critical factor when the outside world is a freezing, perpetual twilight. The air in the byre is thick with the smell of animal droppings, hay, and the sweet, milky scent of livestock. It's a comforting smell, a scent of life, even if it is a bit. Earthy caring for the animals in these conditions is a relentless, exhausting chore. You spend hours each day in the dim, damp byre, mucking out stalls, ensuring the animals have fresh, if frigid water, and, most critically, distributing their feed. Hay, carefully harvested and dried in the short summer, is your most precious commodity after human food. You dole it out in precise, measured amounts, watching each animal chew slowly, their breath misting in the cold air. You know the exact condition of each animal, which cow is looking too thin, which away is pregnant and needs extra care, which goat is prone to illness. A sick animal is a potential catastrophe, not just for itself, but for the entire family. You check udders for signs of mastitis, hooves for rot, and eyes for dullness. The sounds of the byre, the soft lowing of a cow, the bleating of sheep, the gentle rustling of hay, are a constant, low murmur of life that contrasts with the eerie silence outside. A quirky tidbit is that some Viking-era livestock breeds, like the Icelandic sheep, are direct descendants of these resilient animals. It's adapted over centuries to harsh northern climates. They possess a double-layered fleece, ideal for insulation, and an incredible ability to forage on sparse vegetation. Historians still debate the specific methods of animal husbandry used in different parts of Scandinavia during such extreme weather events, particularly how far into the winter they would slaughter animals to conserve feed versus trying to keep them alive for breeding or milk. For you, it's a desperate balancing act. You might have already slaughtered the weaker or older animals in the early winter to preserve feed and use their meat. But now, Every living creature is a sacred trust. The thought of losing an animal to cold or starvation is almost unbearable. A direct blow to your family's dwindling chances of survival. You rub down the coats of your favorite cow, Freya, or your sturdy ram, Thor, murmuring words of encouragement, as if they too understand the gravity of the situation. You clean their stalls with a heavy wooden muck rake, the frozen waste of surprising weight, and carry it out to the growing midden heap outside, a small, steaming mountain in the perpetual twilight. It's a reminder of the relentless cycle of life and waste, even in the depths of winter. The very air you breathe in the longhouse is warmer because of these creatures. A constant low-humming furnace fueled by their bodies. They are not just your farm, they are your lifeline. Even in the depths of a sunless winter, within the smoky confines of the longhouse, life finds a way to assert itself, especially for the children. While the adults are consumed by the grim realities of survival, rationing food, tending livestock, maintaining the fire, the youngest members of your community, with their innate resilience and boundless energy, somehow manage to carve out moments of play and simple joy. You watch them, these tiny Vikings, their faces smudged with soot, their knees perpetually grazed, and you marvel at their capacity for hope. They don't fully grasp the existential dread that grips the adults. For them, this perpetual twilight is simply the way the world is right now. It's just a really, really long, cold night. Their games are constrained by the limited space and resources, but they are no less imaginative. You see them huddle in a corner, whispering secrets, their small hands manipulating carved wooden figures of animals or tiny long ships. They might play a primitive form of tag, dodging around the sleeping platforms and supporting posts, their giggles echoing in the normally subdued longhouse. Sometimes they gather around the hearth, not just for warmth, but to watch the dancing flames. Mesmerized by the light, perhaps inventing stories in the flickering shadows. A mainstream historical fact is that childhood in the Viking Age was far from idyllic by modern standards. Children were expected to contribute to household chores from a young age and learned essential skills early. But this didn't negate play. A quirky tidbit is the discovery of small, intricately carved wooden toys, including horses, boats, and dolls, in Viking archaeological sites, confirming that play was a recognized part of childhood even then. These weren't mass-produced. Each was likely a precious, handcrafted item. Historians still debate the extent of formal education versus experiential learning for Viking children, especially in such isolated settings. But it's clear there. Play was often a mirror of adult life, practicing skills, developing cooperation, and understanding their environment. You might see a small boy carefully attempting to whittle a piece of wood with a dull knife, mimicking his father, or a girl meticulously braiding strands of wool, copying her mother. Their games are a form of apprenticeship, preparing them for the harsh realities they will inevitably face. You've even seen them play a game where they pretend to be foraging for food, carefully finding imaginary berries or roots. A chilling echo of the adult's daily struggle. But for them, it's just fun. Sometimes you'll hear them singing simple, repetitive songs, perhaps old rhymes passed down through generations. Or new ones, invented on the spot about the big, dark outside. These small bursts of sound are like tiny bells in the oppressive quiet, a reminder that life, even in the bleakest circumstances, insists on being lived. You find yourself smiling, a rare and precious occurrence watching them. Their innocence is a shield, protecting them from the full weight of the sunless winter. And their joy, however fleeting, becomes a source of quiet strength for the weary adults. You might even join in for a moment, rolling a carved wooden ball, or pretending to be a monstrous beast for them to defeat. And for a brief, beautiful instant, the cold and the hunger and the darkness recede, replaced by the simple warmth of shared laughter. It's a reminder that even when the world goes dark, the light of human spirit, especially in its purest form, can still flicker brightly. With the sun, an absent friend, and outdoor activity severely limited, the Longhouse transforms into a hub of cultural and intellectual life, where the ancient tradition of sagas by firelight takes on an even greater importance. As the perpetual twilight deepens outside, and the gnawing cold insists upon its presence, The flickering light of the central hearth becomes the stage for the collective memory and imagination of your people. You gather on low benches, on piles of furs, or simply on the packed earth floor, your faces turned towards the elder, the skald, or the most gifted storyteller among you. Their voice, deep and resonant, fills the smoky air, weaving tales of gods and giants, heroes and villains, ancient battles and daring voyages. These aren't just stories for entertainment. They are living history, moral lessons, and spiritual guidance all rolled into one. They are the threads that bind your community to its past, giving context and meaning to your present struggle. You hear of Odin, the Allfather, sacrificing an eye for wisdom, Thor the Thunderer, battling monstrous serpents, Freya, the goddess of love and battle, her tears turning to gold. You'll learn about the distant lands discovered by your ancestors, the epic journeys across stormy seas, the glorious victories, and the tragic defeats. These sagas are mnemonic devices. It's ways to pass down critical knowledge and values across generations in a pre-literate society. A mainstream historical fact is that oral tradition was paramount in Viking culture, with sagas often recited over multiple nights. The Poetic Edda and Prose Edda, compiled much later, are written records of these oral traditions. A quirky tidbit is that some Skald's poets had an incredible ability to recite complex poems for hours, sometimes incorporating hundreds of verses, an impressive feat of memory, especially without notes. Historians still argue about the precise degree of historical accuracy within the sagas, differentiating between myth, legend, and actual events. But for the Vikings, the distinction was often blurred. They were all truths in different forms. For you, sitting there, your stomach grumbling softly, the warmth of the fire on your face, these stories are a lifeline. They transport you beyond the cramped, cold walls of the longhouse, allowing your mind to wander to sun-drenched fjords, bustling markets, or the exhilarating rush of a longship cutting through waves. They are a psychological balm, a way to forget, for a precious hour, the grim realities of the sunless winter. You listen, enthralled, as the storyteller describes a bountiful harvest or a glorious raid. And for a moment, you can almost taste the roasted meat or feel the spray of the ocean. Sometimes, a particularly harrowing part of a saga about a terrible winter or a failed harvest feels almost too real, causing a collective intake of breath among the listeners. But even then, the tale offers a strange comfort, a reminder that your ancestors too faced immense hardships and found ways to endure. Shared active listening, the communal silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and the storyteller's voice, fosters a profound sense of unity. You are not alone in this dark time. You are part of a continuous, ancient narrative of survival and resilience. It's like a primitive form of therapy, a way to process the unspoken fears and find strength in shared identity. When the story concludes, often with a subtle, melancholic ending, there's a quiet hum in the longhouse. A collective sigh as everyone slowly returns from the world of myth to the reality of their present. Perhaps a little stronger for the journey. When the outside world offers no warmth, no light, and no fresh food, the longhouse becomes a crucible of self-sufficiency. The long hours of sunless winter force your community to turn inward, focusing on the essential skills of crafting for survival. Every adult, and indeed many of the children, has a role to play, their hands constantly busy, transforming raw materials into necessities. You understand that idleness is a luxury you cannot afford. Every piece of clothing, every tool, every mended item extends your chances of enduring this impossible winter. You might see your wife, or sister, or grandmother hunched over a primitive loom, the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the shuttle, a constant backdrop to the sounds of the longhouse. They are weaving coarse, thick wool into fabric for tunics, cloaks, and blankets, vital layers against the pervasive cold. The wool shorn from your own sheep before the worst of the winter set in is precious. Every thread counts. A mainstream historical fact is that textiles were incredibly important in Viking society, not just for clothing but as a form of currency and tribute. The production was largely domestic. A quirky tidbit is the use of plant dyes to create surprisingly vibrant colors like madder red, woad blue, though indigo was also traded, weld yellow, which would have brightened the dull winter existence. Historians still argue about the precise division of labor in Viking households, but it's clear that women played a dominant role in textile production and food preparation. Meanwhile, you and the other men might be engaged in woodworking. You use your axe and knife with practiced precision, shaping timber into replacement tool handles, mending a broken support beam, or carving simple bowls and spoons. Every piece of wood is valuable, salvaged from autumn clearings or old structures. The smell of fresh-cut wood, even in the smoky air, is a comforting scent of purpose. Or perhaps you're repairing leather straps, oiling tools, or sharpening blades. Metalwork, if you have a skilled smith or access to a small forge, is reserved for the most crucial repairs. A broken axe head, a damaged knife blade. The glow of a small, carefully stoked forge fire is a rare. Intense point of light in the longhouse, its clanging sounds a brief. Sharp punctuation in the usual quiet hum of domestic industry. Even the children learn early, perhaps sorting wool, gathering dropped wood shavings for kindling, or polishing bone needles. This isn't just about creating objects, it's about maintaining a sense of order, a resistance against the chaos of the sunless world. Each finished piece, whether a sturdy pair of mittens, a newly sharpened knife, or a mended bucket, is a small victory. It reinforces the idea that you are not helpless, that you possess the skills and ingenuity to provide for yourselves. You remember the old proverb, "A good tool makes for good work"? In this winter, good work is survival. The rhythmic sounds of crafting, the shuttle, the carving knife, the occasional hammer blow, are not just noise. They are the pulse of a community determined to endure. You feel a quiet satisfaction as your calloused hands work, shaping, mending, creating, proving that even when the sun hides, humanity finds its own light through industry and resilience. When the physical world fails to provide, and rational solutions seem to dissipate into the perpetual gloom, a community turns to the intangible. In your Viking farm, facing the sunless winter, the role of the shaman's council becomes paramount. The shaman, or vulva, if female, is not just a healer or a religious figure. They are the bridge between your grim reality and the unseen world of gods, spirits, and ancestors. They are the interpreters of omens, the wielders of ancient knowledge, and the last resort when all other hope seems lost. You see them, often adorned with symbolic animal parts, feathers, or strange amulets, their eyes holding a deep, unsettling knowledge. You might approach the shaman with a desperate plea, a child with a persistent cough that won't break, a fear that the livestock are wasting away too quickly, or simply the crushing weight of the endless darkness that threatens to break your spirit. The shaman listens, their face impassive, perhaps offering a strange concoction of herbs collected in sunnier times, or performing a ritual by the hearth. They might read omens in the patterns of smoke, the flight of birds, if any could be seen, or the fall of carved bones. A mainstream historical fact is that shamanic practices, including divination and healing rituals, were common in pre-Christian Norse societies, intertwining deeply with their animistic beliefs. The Volar female shamans were particularly respected and feared for their ability to see the future and commune with spirits. A quirky tidbit is the use of hallucinogenic plants or fungi in some shamanic rituals to induce altered states of consciousness, allowing them to journey to other realms for answers. Historians still argue about the exact nature of these practices and how widespread the use of entheogens was, but their perceived connection to the divine was undeniable. For you, the council of the shaman might involve a complex ritual, perhaps a trance, accompanied by rhythmic drumming or chanting. As they seek answers from the Norns, the fates who weave the destiny of all beings, they might tell you of a necessary sacrifice to appease a displeased god, or offer a prophecy, however cryptic, about the sun's eventual return. Sometimes, their advice is surprisingly practical, rooted in centuries of empirical observation of nature, disguised as spiritual wisdom. The spirit of the goat is weak, they might say. It needs more of the bitter herb from the south-facing rock. And you, though perhaps skeptical in sunnier times, are now desperate enough to follow any guidance that offers a glimmer of hope. The shaman's power lies not just in their perceived connection to the supernatural, but in their ability to provide psychological comfort, to explain the inexplicable, and to offer a framework for understanding the profound catastrophe of the sunless winter. They are a focal point for the community's anxieties and hopes, a figure who can articulate the unspeakable fears and channel them into action, even if that action is merely a symbolic ritual. Their presence, their rituals, and their sometimes unsettling predictions are a constant reminder that in the face of overwhelming natural forces, humanity still strives to understand, to influence, and to survive. Their words, delivered with gravitas, carry weight, even when the logic escapes you. It's a testament to the human need for meaning, even in the darkest of times. You still seek wisdom from beyond the veil, as the sunless winter drags on, and hunger becomes a constant, gnawing presence. A desperate shift in mentality begins to occur. The traditional Viking methods of coping, like relying on stored food and communal warmth, prove insufficient against this unprecedented darkness. When resources dwindle to critical levels, and the specter of starvation looms larger with each passing twilight, some in your community begin to whisper about raids in the gloom. This is a terrifying prospect, but one born of sheer desperation. Raiding, for the Vikings, was often a seasonal activity, undertaken in warmer months when seas were navigable and farms were ripe for plunder. A winter raid, especially one conducted in perpetual twilight, is an act of sheer madness. But madness born of necessity. You overhear hushed conversations among the younger, stronger men. Their faces are grim, their eyes hollow with hunger, but a spark of dangerous resolve ignites within them. They talk of distant settlements, perhaps those less prepared, or those caught unaware by the strange, unending night. The risks are immense. Navigating treacherous, ice-choked waters in conditions of near-zero visibility, facing unknown dangers in a world swallowed by shadow, and the almost certain prospect of frostbite, exposure, or drowning. The usual elements of surprise and speed in a Viking raid are amplified by the darkness, but so are the dangers. A mainstream historical fact is that while Viking raids are often associated with summer, historical records and archaeological finds suggest that desperate times, such as famine, sometimes spurred winter expeditions. Though these were far riskier, a quirky tidbit is the use of specialized knowledge of ice formations and coastal currents, passed down through generations, which would have been absolutely critical for any winter sea journey. Historians still argue whether such extreme winter raids were truly viable on a large scale or were more isolated, desperate ventures by small groups. For your community, it's a gamble with life and death. You see the men sharpening their axes. By the faint hearthlight, their movements slower, more deliberate than usual. They check their longship, now coated in a thin layer of hoarfrost, wondering if it can even be freed from the ice. The thought of setting out into that vast, freezing unknown with no sun to guide them is terrifying. Yet, the alternative, starvation, even more so. You watch as a small group prepares, wrapping themselves in every available fur, packing what little dried meat and hardtack they can spare for the journey, and filling water skins with icy water. There are no boisterous farewells, no shouts of glory, only grim nods, the tightening of cloaks, and the soft crunch of their boots on the frozen snow as they slip away into the suffocating gloom. You wonder if you will ever see them again, or if this desperate gamble will yield a fleeting respite or simply another tragic loss. The longhouse feels emptier, colder, and even more silent without their presence. The tension palpable as everyone waits in the endless twilight for news that may never come. The constant, unyielding darkness of the sunless winter exacts a profound psychological toll, not just on the body, but on the very soul. As weeks turn into months and the sun remains a cruel absence, the human spirit, resilient as it is, begins to fray. You find yourself consumed by a pervasive melancholy, a dull ache that settles deep in your chest. This isn't just sadness. It's a deep-seated weariness, a longing for something you instinctively know should be there, but isn't. This is the weight of dreams of spring. Every waking moment, and even your dreams, are tinged with the yearning for the sun's return. You catch yourself staring at the smoke hole, willing a brighter light to appear, an act of futile hope. Your conversations become quieter, more subdued. The vibrant energy that usually courses through your community, even in the depths of a normal winter, is replaced by a slow, plodding pace. See it in the eyes of your neighbors. A dullness, a profound exhaustion that sleep cannot fully cure. There are whispers of madness, of people seeing things in the gloom, of despair creeping into the corners of their minds. You try to fight it, to focus on the immediate tasks, but the mind inevitably wanders. You close your eyes and images flood your mind. The blinding gold of a summer sunrise over the fjord, the vivid green of new growth on the trees, the joyous splash of children playing in a sun-dappled stream. These memories, once comforting, now feel like cruel taunts, highlighting the stark desolation of your present. A mainstream historical fact is that seasonal affective disorder SAD is a very real phenomenon linked to lack of sunlight. And while not understood in historical terms, its effects would have been profound in perpetually dark environments. A quirky tidbit is the historical use of glowing fungi, or phosphorescent materials, like certain minerals or treated fish scales, by some northern cultures as a source of dim, magical light during long, dark periods, perhaps offering a tiny psychological boost. Historians still argue about the extent of mental health issues in pre-modern societies, but it's undeniable that extreme environmental stressors would have pushed people to their limits. For you, the internal struggle is constant. Find yourself replaying memories of warmth, trying to conjure the feeling of sun on your skin, the scent of blooming flowers, the sound of birdsong. The lack of natural light disrupts sleep patterns, making restful sleep a rare commodity. You wake often, disoriented, unsure if it's day or night, further blurring the lines of time. Silence outside is not peaceful. It's heavy, oppressive. A constant reminder of the world frozen and hushed beneath the endless twilight. You start to notice how people unconsciously lean towards the fire, not just for physical warmth, but for the psychological comfort of its light. The smallest flicker, the faintest glow from a tallow candle, becomes a precious commodity. You might catch yourself idly carving a small, stylized sun symbol into a piece of wood. A silent prayer, a desperate plea to the unseen powers. The dream of spring is not merely a desire for warmth and food. It is a primal craving for the return of light, of color, of life itself. It is the unshakable belief that this darkness, however long and cruel, cannot truly be eternal. And that belief, however fragile, is what keeps you in your community. From truly succumbing to the gloom, amidst the oppressive gloom and gnawing hunger of the sunless winter, there comes a time, deep in the heart of the darkness, when your community rallies its remaining strength for a powerful act of defiance. The Yule Feast's hope. Yule, the midwinter festival, is more than just a celebration. It's a vital psychological anchor, a collective act of faith that the light will return. It's the longest night of the year, or, in your case, the peak of the endless night, and, paradoxically, it's also the moment when the promise of returning light is at its strongest. Preparations for Yule have been ongoing, albeit with far fewer resources than usual. The special ale, brewed in autumn, is now carefully brought forth, its pungent aroma filling the longhouse. The last best cuts of preserved meat, perhaps a single cured ham, or the last of the prized dried fish, are brought out, their preciousness magnified by the scarcity. You've even managed to gather a few precious evergreens, their dark needles, a sharp contrast to the gray world outside. To bring into the longhouse, a small act of bringing life and hope indoors. A mainstream historical fact is that Yule was a significant pagan festival in Norse culture, celebrated with feasting, sacrifices, and rituals aimed at encouraging the sun's return and ensuring good fortune for the coming year. It often involved a 12-day period of celebration. A quirky tidbit is the tradition of burning a Yule log for as long as possible, sometimes for the entire 12 days, symbolizing the extended daylight and the triumph of light over darkness. Historians still argue about the precise rituals and beliefs surrounding Yule and how much it influenced later Christian Christmas traditions. But its importance for community cohesion and morale is clear. For you, the Yule feast is a precious break from the relentless grimness. You gather with your family and neighbors, your faces for once showing a hint of genuine joy rather than just weary resolve. The longhouse is decorated with what little beauty can be salvaged, perhaps some carved wooden ornaments or simple braided straw figures. The fire, stoked to its brightest, casts a warm, inviting glow, momentarily banishing the shadows to the furthest corners. Not just the sagas, but lighter tales, anecdotes from past summers, memories of better times. You raise your horn of ale, however diluted, and offer toasts to Odin, to Thor, to the ancestors, and most importantly, to the sun. Children, usually so quiet, are allowed a little more freedom, their laughter a precious sound. There's a tangible sense of solidarity, a feeling that if you can get through this night, you can get through anything. This communal act of defiance, this shared commitment to hope in the face of overwhelming darkness, strengthens bonds. You look around at the faces of your family, your community, and you see not just hunger or fear, but a flicker of shared human warmth, a collective refusal to surrender. The feast itself, though meager, is a potent symbol, a reminder that even when resources are scarce, the human spirit can find abundance in connection and shared belief. It is a moment when everyone consciously chooses hope, a vital surge of psychological energy to propel them through the last hardest stretches of the sunless winter. After the brief, potent surge of hope brought by the Yule feast, the sunless, winter continues its relentless grip, but something subtle begins to shift. You don't see it at first, not directly, but you feel it in the air, a faint tremor in the deep cold. The silence outside your longhouse, once absolute and oppressive, is now punctuated by new sounds. The cracking and groaning of ice, the distant rush of water, and a faint, almost imperceptible lightening of the perpetual gloom. These are the first precious signs of the thawing of the fjords. And with it, the slow, agonizingly gradual promise of spring. You begin to spend more time near the smoke hole, or peering through the small horn window, straining your eyes against the persistent twilight. One day you notice that the deep, impenetrable gray outside has softened just a fraction, barely discernible lighter shade hinting at the sky beyond. And comes the sound. A faint, low rumble, like a distant thunder, which you soon realize is the monumental sound of a vast sheet of ice, miles out in the fjord, finally giving way under immense pressure. It's a sound that fills you with a mix of awe and terror, a reminder of nature's raw, untamed power. A mainstream historical fact is that the breakup of sea ice and river ice was a critical event for northern communities, marking the return of fishing, trade, and travel. This period was often fraught with danger as ice flows could be unpredictable. A quirky tidbit is the practice of ice listening, where experienced individuals would put their ears to the ice to discern subtle changes in its thickness and stability, predicting when it would be safe or dangerously unsafe to travel. Still argue about the exact timing and variability of ice breakup in historical northern climates, as it was highly dependent on specific regional conditions. For you, these are the most nerve-wracking days of the winter. You know that the melting ice also brings dangers, increased risk of flooding, unstable paths, and the threat of getting caught on a drifting flow. But the overwhelming emotion is one of profound relief. You point out the subtle changes to your children, teaching them to listen, to observe, to understand these vital signs of the world reawakening. See, you whisper, the ice weeps. It's not a sudden dramatic spring. It's a hesitant, almost reluctant thaw, a battle between the lingering grip of winter and the nascent strength of new life. The snow around the longhouse begins to soften, losing its crisp, crystalline edge, turning slushy and heavy underfoot. Small rivulets of meltwater begin to trickle from the turf roof, dripping onto the frozen ground, each drip a tiny bell of hope. You feel a surge of energy, a renewed sense of purpose. The tasks of maintaining the longhouse, once monotonous chores, now become actions imbued with a fresh urgency. You patch a leaky spot in the roof where the turf has shifted, or clear a drainage channel around the foundation. Every small act of preparation feels like a victory against the retreating darkness. The buyer, though still cold, feels less oppressive, and you tend to your animals with a lighter heart, knowing that soon they too will feel the breath of true spring. The long, sunless night is not over, but its end is now, finally visible, however faintly on the distant, thawing horizon. And then, one morning, it happens. After what feels like an eternity of crushing twilight, after months of straining your eyes against the gray, you wake to a phenomenon so profound, so utterly transformative, it feels like a miracle. A sliver of pure, unadulterated gold appears. On the horizon, slowly, inexorably, rising above the distant mountains. Its first light, new life, and the effect is instant and visceral. The world, once flat and monochromatic, explodes into a spectrum of blues, purples and fiery oranges as the sun, your long-lost friend, finally returns. You stumble out of the longhouse, not caring about the lingering cold, your breath catching in your throat. The air itself feels different, cleaner, lighter. The oppressive silence is shattered by the sound of birdsong, hesitant at first, then a full chorus, a symphony of joy. You see your neighbors emerging from their homes, their faces upturned, eyes squinting against the unaccustomed brilliance. Some are weeping openly, tears streaming down faces that have known only shadow for too long. Others simply stand, arms outstretched, silently absorbing the life-giving warmth. It's an almost religious experience, a direct connection to the divine, as if the gods themselves have heard your desperate prayers. A mainstream historical fact is that the return of the sun, after the long Arctic winter, was celebrated across all northern cultures with immense joy and profound spiritual significance, often involving rituals of thanksgiving. A quirky tidbit is that people would sometimes bring out their most precious belongings, even sick family members, to sunbathe them and absorb the first rays, believing it held healing properties. Historians still argue about the specific pagan rites associated with the spring equinox or the first full sunrise after a prolonged dark period, but its importance as a symbol of renewal is universally recognized. For you, the sheer psychological impact is overwhelming. You feel a physical weight lift from your shoulders, a lightness in your steps you haven't experienced in months. The colors dulled for so long now seem impossibly vibrant, the deep blue of the sky, the glistening white of the remaining snow, the dark green of the pines. You watch your children, who have only known a world of twilight, gasp in wonder. Pointing at the sky, their faces illuminated by the unfamiliar golden light, their laughter is no longer muted. It rings out, pure and uninhibited. The animals in the byre stir with a new restlessness, eager for the pastures that will soon green. You feel a surge of energy, a potent desire to work, to rebuild, to prepare for the growing season. The tasks that seemed so arduous in the gloom now feel like a joyful collaboration with the returning world. You begin to clear away the last stubborn snowdrifts, to check your fields, to plan for the spring planting, the smell of thawing earth, rich and fertile, replaces the stale air of the longhouse. Every single detail, from the glint of sunlight on melting ice to the first tentative bud on a bare branch, is a profound affirmation of life. This isn't just the end of winter, it's a resurrection, a promise whispered across the landscape that life, despite all odds, endures. You feel the warmth on your face, a gentle caress after months of biting cold, and you know deep in your bones that you have survived. With the sun finally returned, painting the sky with glorious color each morning, your community shifts from mere survival to the urgent task of rebuilding and renewal. The land, scarred by the long, sunless winter, now demands attention, and your hands, once numb with cold, are now eager for the productive work of spring. This is a period of intense activity, a frantic race against time, to prepare for the growing season and restore what was lost. You begin by assessing the damage. The turf roof of the longhouse, though robust, has shifted in places, requiring careful repacking of earth and turf. The fences around your fields, battered by snowdrifts and winds, need repair. Your longship, which perhaps carried the desperate raiders, now needs to be completely dried, tarred, and made ready for fishing and summer voyages. Every crack, every loose timber, every sagging rope is noted and addressed. A mainstream historical fact is that spring was a crucial time for agricultural preparations in Viking society, involving communal efforts like clearing fields, repairing structures, and preparing tools. A quirky tidbit is the use of animal bones, as early fertilizers or tools ground down and spread on fields to enrich the soil, a testament to their resourcefulness. Historians still argue about the specific types of crop rotation or agricultural techniques used by Vikings in different regions, but their reliance on a successful growing season was absolute. For you, the sounds of spring are the sounds of work. The rhythmic thud of an axe as you split fresh wood for repairs, scrape of shovels as you clear remaining snow and debris, the cheerful chatter of children helping to gather loose stones. From the fields, you work from the first light of dawn until the lingering twilight, driven by an almost manic energy. The animals are led out into the emerging pastures, their joyous frolicking a sight for sore eyes, but they still need careful tending as the ground remains too sparse for full grazing. You inspect your fields, noting the patches where the soil is still too waterlogged or too frozen. Seeds carefully stored through the winter are now examined, their potential life held in your palm. There's a renewed sense of camaraderie among the villagers. Tasks are shared, help is offered freely. The communal spirit, honed by the shared hardship of the sunless winter, now transforms into a collective drive for productivity. You mend fishing nets, anticipating the return of the fish to the fjords. You clean and sharpen your agricultural tools, the metal gleaming in the sun. This is not just physical labor. It's an act of defiance against the harshness of the past. Winter, a declaration that life will not only continue, but thrive. The feeling of the soft, damp earth beneath your boots, the smell of fresh soil, the distant bleating of lambs. These are intoxicating sensations after months of confinement and cold. Every small repair, every patch of cleared ground, every seed planted, is a tangible step towards a future of abundance. You look at your hands, rough and calloused, but now filled with purpose, and you know that the hard-won lessons of survival are now being put to the ultimate test, not just to live, but to flourish. As the days lengthen, the sun climbs higher, and the world bursts into the vibrant activity of spring. You find yourself looking back at the sunless winter, not just with relief, but with a profound understanding. The experience, though harrowing, has etched itself onto the very fabric of your being, and indeed onto the collective memory of your community. These are the lessons from darkness, hard-won wisdom that will shape your future and become part of the stories you tell your grandchildren. You understand? The clarity that only extreme hardship can bring, the true meaning of resilience, is not just about physical strength, but about the stubborn refusal of the human spirit to yield, even when all light is extinguished. You learn the absolute necessity of community, of huddling together for warmth, sharing the last scraps of food, and finding solace in shared sagas. The longhouse, once just a structure, became a living, breathing symbol of collective survival, its smoky interior a sanctuary against an indifferent world. You also learn the profound fragility of existence, the thin veil between abundance and starvation. The sun, once taken for granted, is now revered with an almost spiritual fervor. Every ray of light is a blessing, every green shoot a miracle. A mainstream historical fact is that periods of extreme climate events often led to significant social and technological adaptations in historical societies, fostering innovation and strengthening community bonds. A quirky tidbit is that some historians speculate such prolonged dark periods might have contributed to the rich, imaginative Norse mythology where cosmic battles of light and darkness are central. As a way to make sense of inexplicable natural phenomena, historians still argue about the precise long-term impact of specific historical climate events on cultural development and migration patterns, but their transformative power is undeniable. For you, the sounds of this new, vibrant spring, the buzz of bees, the rush of the river, The distant shouts of children playing outdoors are a constant symphony of triumph. You feel the sun on your face, not as an abstract concept, but as a warm, tangible embrace after an eternity of cold. You walk through your fields, planning the planting, and you do so with a deeper respect for the land, a renewed commitment to working in harmony with its rhythms. The lessons are etched onto your very soul, the value of careful planning and resource management, the power of oral tradition to maintain morale and identity, and the enduring strength found in human connection. You carry the scars of the sunless winter, both physical and emotional, but you also carry its gifts, an unshakable inner fortitude, and a deeper appreciation for the simple blessings of light and life, and the knowledge that your community can face down even the most impossible of winters and emerge, battered but unbroken, into the light. As the sun sets on this brighter day, casting long shadows across your mended longhouse, you feel a quiet peace. The long night is truly over. As you drift to sleep, the images of the sun, strong and golden, dance behind your eyelids, a silent promise for tomorrow.